with Lean Frontiers. Good to see everybody today. On our screen, you can see Steve Riley. Steve Riley is a manufacturing and operations leader with more than 30 years of experience improving performance, streamlining processes, and building high-performing teams. He earned his BS in aviation technology from Central Missouri State University and an MBA from the Jack Welch Management Institute. As Chief Organization Officer at Bespoke, he helps organizations achieve lasting efficiency through custom tool control solutions. A quick reminder, you will receive a link from me with the recording within 24 to 48 hours. And Steve, I believe that is all from me. You can go ahead and take over.
Great. Thank you, Skylar. I appreciate the introduction there. Welcome for everybody that's joined us this morning. Excited to share with you this topic. Always like to know where people are coming from. So if you want to just drop a note in the chat about your location, that would be great. Kind of see those popping by as we get rolling. Kentucky, very good. It's nice to see what part of the country is being represented in Maine. Good job. All right. Welcome, everybody. Okay, as we get started this morning, I'd like to ask you to think about a project that your organization took on and completed sometime in, say, the middle of last year, 2024. So think about what that project was and kind of have that in mind. In fact, if you want to drop a message in the chat about what that was too, I would love to see those go by as well. So as you think about that project, we'll talk about that a little bit, how that went for you and what the results were. So today, what I wanted to do was to use the power of the technology from today and take everybody that attends live on a virtual Gimbal walk, where we would go and visit each of the sites where you guys had done these projects that you have in your mind there. Turns out that technology isn't quite ready for us yet today, so we're not going to do that. But as an exercise, I'd like you to imagine that it was possible, that we'd be able to take the entire group that's here and we would walk to the location where you did your implementation, and we'd be able to see it live in action today. And as we do that, I'd like you to think about this question. The answer to this question is, if we were to do that, to walk to your locations and observe how it was operating right now, would we see it operating the way it was at the end of your implementation with all the things in place that you had put in place? And was it still bringing value to the organization the way it was and the way you intended when you did the implementation? So just think on that question. Now, if you answered no to that question, unfortunately, your project is in good company. That's kind of the state of affairs for many projects, where they get kicked off and operate, but don't bring lasting results. So that's certainly not what we want, and we want to talk about today. How do we change that as we go forward? Our goal is to help you bring lasting results for your organization, so that when you do an implementation, it's bringing results for the company and you're getting the credit you need in your roles for the work that you've done. Okay, so let's talk about the reason for this conversation. So the truth is that most continuous improvement projects don't last. They lose momentum over time. So continuous improvement programs of all flavors, whether it's 5S, JIT, TPS, Six Sigma, the whole gamut, they're being criticized for their lack of return on investment. So the financial people with an organization are looking at the effort that's being put out. They're saying, we're really not getting the gains that were promised when the projects were kicked off. And so that's a black mark for those of us who are trying to do continuous improvement programs. Noted here in 2021, McKinsey & Company did a study on continuous improvement projects, and they found that 70% of continuous improvement projects didn't bring lasting results to their organization. So that's pretty bad mark for us. 7 out of 10 projects just failed to have any lasting gains. So that's not very good. It's not very encouraging, actually. If our role is a manufacturing leader or a continuous improvement specialist or some flavor of that, and this is our scorecard, we want to make sure that we're doing better than that. You know, the good news is that there are proven things that can be done to improve the chances of having lasting results. And that's really what we want to talk about today is how do we implement those things to make sure that the things we do bring value to our organization for the long haul and not just for the first few months. So really, and from a career perspective, we want to make sure that things we're doing are getting the results that we're promising, and that that gives us the visibility we need in the organization to continue to do these things going out in the future. So today we want to talk about how do we bring about lasting results. So I'm sure that most of you who've joined today are familiar with the 5 Japanese words and the English translation that is shown here on the screen, some version of sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. So that's the basic 5S structure that we've all been taught and we've worked on implementing. Today, we're going to use that as our backbone for the conversation, but know that the things that we're talking about apply to the other continuous improvement initiatives as well. So you just translate them. So we'll use this as our focus, but it does apply to other things as well. Now, for me personally, back in the summer of 2016, I was sitting in a panel interview as a applicant for an operations manager position. And I asked the team that was there where they were in their lean journey. And after a small pause, the leader responded, "We're pretty good at 3S." Of course, that led to chuckles around the table from the rest of the group. And basically that person was indicating that they had projects that started, but really didn't bring lasting results. And that's really what we want to talk about today. How do we change that story? So you guys are familiar with the first 3 of these. The sort process, where your team enthusiastically goes out, they red tag all the things in the area that they don't want to have there anymore. They organize the stuff that's left, and they begin to clean up those items. And that's often what a 5S initiative looks like. Unfortunately, that's the spot where things begin to slow down or maybe stop altogether for the project. And the team's feeling pretty good about it. The work area is looking better than before, and they feel like they've accomplished something. So when that happens, I refer to that as a spring cleaning project rather than a 5S initiative. And the difference is that a spring cleaning project, the work area is going to devolve back into looking like it did before you started. And it's going to have to be repeated again, and probably in less than a year, truthfully. So the key to sustained results really take place in the last 2 steps of the 5S process. The first 3 just set the stage for it, but the real work of sustaining really takes place in the last portions of it. So today we want to talk about 4 tips to help make continuous improvement projects stick. They won't specifically be in stages 4 and 5 necessarily. They apply to all of it, but know that it really is the focus, and something to take away from today's discussion is sustain comes at the end of 5S, not at the beginning of 5S. So again, we want to talk about some simple things that you can do to improve the chances of your projects being successful for the long haul. Okay, so for the first tip is to start with a very clear plan. Define what success looks like before you get started. So in Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits, he taught us about the phrase, begin with the end in mind. And that really just means be clear about what it is you want to do and how you're going to measure it before you get started. So what he's really referring to there is project management, right? So when we have an initiative, you really are doing a project by definition. You have an initiative that has a beginning, middle, and end, and it's something that hasn't been done before. So it meets the classic definition of a project. Now, as far as project management systems go, there's lots of them available. You can use whichever one works for you or your organization, what you're comfortable with, is make sure that it's effective. Many people like the SMART goals approach to setting a project plan. So you're familiar with that. Again, the SMART is specific, measurable, achievable, relative to the work being done, and time-based. And the key ones that I like to take out of there is that it's specific, measurable, and time-based. If you get those 3 covered, you're doing pretty well. So again, make sure that you have a plan in place to do project management, not just launch into a project without a plan. Now, part of planning is having a definition of what it is you want to accomplish. So if we were to put up this in response to the question of what you're going to do, saying we're going to go organize the area, would that be a very good project definition for a 5S project? Not really, right? It's very vague. It's unclear what's going to happen. Nobody can really visualize what that's going to look like when you're done. So we want to avoid those kind of things in our project planning phase. Make sure we're more clear than that. So we get rid of that. Let me say we'll do something that looks more like this kind of a phrase, that we'll reduce setup time by 25% within 30 days. Tells us a little bit more about what's going to happen in that project. You know, what the target is, what we're going to accomplish in terms of what we're attacking is the setup time in the area, how much we want to reduce it. So there must be a measurement already in place for a baseline, and then the time in which we're going to complete it. So make sure you have something like that in place as you launch into your project. Also, another part of project management is assigning roles. So everybody's clear about what it is that they are to do, what their responsibilities are within it, and then a set of deliverables. What's going to be done and tangible at the end of the project that wasn't there at the beginning. That's your deliverables list. So taking the time to go to that level is critical to having a project last beyond just a few weeks or months. So all worthwhile projects benefit from having a plan like this before they get started. A clear plan and opportunity to discuss that just provides clarity for everybody that's going to be involved. Which leads us to our second tip. Involve everyone. So leaders and staff of the area that's going to be impacted need to be part of your project. So if only the manager of the area cares about the 5S or whatever continuous improvement initiative you have going, it won't stick. That's pretty much guaranteed. No matter how much that person tries to enforce that and force it on the rest of the team, it's not going to stick. This will be a very short-lived initiative. People support what they help create. And that's just the reality of it, is if we can get buy-in up front, people will support it and it will last just much longer than it was without that. So make sure that you allow everybody that's involved have input on the plan as you do your planning phase and on the implementation. The more people you get involved in the solution, the better chance you have of that lasting into the future. Now, that doesn't mean that managers' support is not necessary. We talked about the line staff being an important part of it, but the leaders of the organization are an important part as well. So Charles Edward Jones is famous for saying, "What interests my boss fascinates me." And that's just the reality that what leaders of an organization are looking to does trickle down, and everybody wants to support those initiatives more. So do what you can to get support as high up in the organization as possible as you launch your project. You know, if your organization is small enough that you can get the CEO interested in your initiative, all the better. That would be fantastic. But get as high in the organization as you can and get them involved in the process, at least the planning, and showing their support for the project so that everybody else is, again, fascinated by your project. So I think the key to this tip is to get support as high up in the organization as possible. The higher you can get for support, the higher the chance that others will be supportive as well, which is really a key part to success of your program. We'll touch some more on team engagement on tip number 4, but for now, we'll go ahead and move on to number 3. So use visual management tools as part of your project. This is really the core of simple ways you can make a big difference in your project here. Visual clues are the best way to reinforce change. So talk to here briefly about the stripes in a parking lot. So the picture there on your screen. Think about the power of that little bit of paint that's placed there. It's a pretty good chance that all the workers in your organization arrived at work this morning parked their cars relatively orderly, and got to work without having anybody out in the parking lot directing traffic, right? That's incredible, right? Just a little bit of paint on the pavement allows people to know what to do. And that's because we've been trained by our traffic system how to follow that, and just people will fall in line. This kind of shows the power of visual tools, and using those visual cues as part of your implementation really is a big deal. Gwendolyn Galsworth spent her career helping organizations to implement visual workplace. And she says here that if you can't be lean, you can't be lean if you don't get visual. And there's a lot of truth in that statement. Is visual controls are self-reinforcing, and without those, it's very difficult to have a sustained initiative. So let's talk about a few examples of visual tools. There's lots of them. We're just going to touch on 4 of them today that are easy to implement and kind of a low-hanging fruit, as it were. And but you can apply just as many of those as possible. Just think about, how do I apply visual tools to my project, would be kind of the question for the day. And I'll see if I can get my mouse to work here. There we go. So first one here, just floor tape. So think about the power of the lines in the parking lot. Same thing applies inside your building. A little bit of floor tape to designate aisleways, pathways, where product goes, where product doesn't go, where the garbage cans go. All those things just go a long way to giving direction to the organization, and those will be followed just inherently as people walk through through your workplace. So floor tape, fairly inexpensive and easy to implement. One guidance on that is, if you do floor tape that's cheap and that tears up in a few weeks or a month, that's not going to be successful for your project long term. So make sure you spend a little bit of effort, get stuff that's going to fit in your environment. So if you have, pallet jacks or forklifts in the area, make sure you get floor tape that's rated for that kind of atmosphere. With that, the tape can last a long time. I like floor tape because it's very visual and appears permanent, but is also fairly easy to adjust and to reset into different directions when the time comes for the next initiative. So a powerful tool. Next one we'll talk about is shadow boards. Having a place for your tools and having it clear where the tools go is, again, a very powerful visual tool. And that can be as simple as hanging all your tools on the wall and drawing with a Sharpie around every shape so that people know where they go back. Those kind of boards, very simple to implement and very effective. As long as your manufacturing leaders are telling people put tools back when you're complete with them, that system works very, very well. On the screen here, here's a foam shadow board, again with a cutout for each of the tools. This is one of the products that we provide people with, and works very well in manufacturing organizations throughout the country. So if you want to learn more about those, or if you have any questions about how to implement shadow boards, we have a free guide. If you just email me, I'll put my email at the end of the slide deck. I'll be glad to send you out a free how-to guide on implementing shadow boards in your organization. Okay, another visual tool is posters and signage throughout the building. Again, people do very well in our highway system following the signs that are along the roadway to get from point A to point B, even in places they've never been before. And that's because of the signage is a very powerful visual connection with the world. As you're building signage, try to use more visual clues and less text clues if possible. Again, arrows are a great way to show directions, pictures of what things should look like. Those kind of visual tools to enhance your posters really help the effectiveness of those. Again, but posters and signage of what the new expectations are is a very powerful way to use visual management. Last, we'll talk about checklists, a little less visual oftentimes, but checklists can be a great way to implement work instructions. So if you're changing the way things are done, checklists are a way to designate the order in which things should take place. Checklists are very powerful. The aviation industry, the safety record is really built on the use of checklists. So even though pilots have done this action hundreds or thousands of times before, they still use a checklist when they go and do their startups and head out to the runway, because that'll just make sure that everything's done the same way every time. They're very simple to use and effective in terms of making sure that there's compliance. If you're not familiar with checklists and how to implement them, I'd recommend a book called The Checklist Manifesto that came out a few years ago. It does a great job of describing kind of the effectiveness of checklists, but also how to implement them so where you don't have too much information, but not also missing things, and just how to implement those well. So I just recommend that book to you if you're a reader and want to learn that skill in your toolbox of things for your continuous improvement. So all these examples, and there's of course many more ways to be visual, really are simple to add to your projects. They're affordable to do, and the support they provide is really to that last step, the sustain step of 5S. And that's the reason that they're so effective in making sure that your project goes the distance. Okay, last, we'll share the tip of just success, what's happened regularly after the completion of your implementation. So if we start a project, we get it rolled out, and then we just drop it, that's probably what's going to happen in the work area as well. People will realize that, hey, this was the flavor of the month. That's behind us now. We'll go back to life as it was before. There's a need to assess regularly what's happening and make sure that things have stayed the way you intended. Now, a lot of people refer to this as an audit, and I think that's a good way to do it. That sometimes the word audit has a negative connotation. So if in your organization that's negative, don't use that. You can use an assessment or some other phrase to describe it. But really what we're talking about here is just a checklist of what the state should be and some way to rate that current state so that people can kind of see how are we doing compared to what was planned. Now you can schedule this to take place, and that's really an important part of when we say regularly, is you need to make sure that this happens. That could be, depending on your organization, that could be weekly, could be monthly, could be some other schedule. It doesn't really matter what the schedule is, as long as it's frequent enough to keep things on track and that you're assured that it's going to happen. Lou Gerstner from IBM was famous for saying that people don't do what you expect, they do what you inspect. And that assessment is really that inspection part of it. Go back and say, like, we laid out a new plan. This is what we're going to do. This is how the organization is to operate. And we're just checking to make sure that it is still happening. Now, if you're not familiar with those or don't have one in place, I'll be glad to send you a free audit template that you can modify to your organization and use. Again, we'll send an email at the end of this that you can just fire off that question, and we'll be glad to send you a copy of a free audit form. Now, as you implement these audits, it's important to involve everyone. Again, don't come back with a clipboard and be like the traffic police. You want to make sure that everybody's involved in this process. So where possible, walk the floor with them, go through the checklist together, make sure everybody agrees on the scoring that you're doing, and then post the results at the end. That public view of what's happening is key to getting buy-in from everybody that's involved. So it's not a punitive look back, but it's simply a reflection of what everybody agrees is happening. So important to have that in place and schedule that and make sure that it takes place at the end of your project. Okay, so as a recap, I'd like you to think back to your continuous improvement project that we talked about at the beginning of the session today, the one that you guys completed a year ago. So think about any areas of that didn't go and last as long as you'd like it to, and then look at these hints that we gave today. Would any of these, if they've been added to your project, improve the opportunity to have lasting results and getting more benefit out of that project than you actually did? So maybe that's the action item out of today, is think about which of these elements would be best to add to your next project, build it into your project plan, and have that result of long-term success for your organization. Now, applying these projects to your project is a great way to improve the opportunity to be in that 30% group instead of the 70% as we go forward, which is really what we want to accomplish. I mentioned earlier, if you want to have an audit form to look at, or if you want to have a shadow board guide on how to implement shadow boards, just drop me an email at this address, put those words in the subject line, and I'll fire those off to you so you can have that free material. And if you have questions on anything else on the topics today, go ahead and email me. I'd be glad to engage and discuss how to have better success in your projects going forward. Thank you, Skylar. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you to everybody who attended today's webinar. Just a quick reminder, you will receive a link within 24 to 48 hours from me with the link to this recording. And again, Steve, thank you so much for attending today. We will see you all again shortly. Bye-bye.